That's right, it's back. The 2013 GMC Acadia with the intermittent, no start, no crank, reduced engine power. So, it's been 45 days since we installed the new fuel pump control module, and it's run perfect since then. Now it's beginning of March, and the owners tell me that it acted up. It did it again. And I asked them, what was the weather like down in West Virginia? And they said, it was raining. That's a clue. Now it's bright and sunny, and they drove the car here, no issues. But this time, there's a difference. It has trouble codes stored, so we actually have a direction. It's not a scribbled piece of paper. I hooked up the scanner. We have some good trouble codes in the computers. So let's get to it. I'll give you the little rundown of what they went through, and hopefully this time we'll fix it for good. Alright, so I guess a couple days ago, the car wouldn't start after sitting in a parking lot for a little while. So, and then a few minutes later it actually fired up. Okay. Next day, I got the call from the customer, and I told him, you have to get this thing scanned professionally. I want to see the codes out of every module, not just the generic list from AutoZone. I want a specific, GM scan for the ECM, the FPCM, the transmission control module, BCM, etc. It has like 30 computers. I want a full scan of all the codes because it is crucial to know where those codes are stored. Okay? Like last time we had that P0606 code, and it could have been stored in the ECM or the FPCM. And we kind of took a guess because we couldn't recreate it, and we replaced the fuel pump control module. But this time we actually have trouble codes stored, and we'll get to that. But in any case, the next morning after it acted up, for the first time recently, it just wouldn't start at all. So they towed it to their local GMC dealership, and obviously they have a good scanner, and they should have been able to do this. It got there on the flatbed. They scanned it, and again, not what I requested. It was just a generic scan. I can show you which codes were stored in it. Here, just a sec. Let me pull up that picture. So hopefully you can make this out, but this is all the dealer gave them. That's it. Codes 606, 700, 69E, 2534. Now the 700 and the 69E means that there are codes stored in the transmission and the fuel pump control module. But those aren't listed here. So come on, dealership. And then they're like, well, it's a no crank, so let's inspect the battery. They put their, and this is their words, I took the time to call that dealership, and the service manager said they put their $8,000 battery tester on it, and it showed that the battery was like super drained. It was not serviceable, so they replaced the battery. And he said the negative battery cable clamp was, loose or something, so they replaced the whole cable too. Okay, now that you disconnected the battery, you can't do a full scan anymore. So that's a mistake, and the battery was fine last month. So again, a new battery, it's a good thing, but that's just the wrong thing to do in this scenario. As luck would have it, they brought it back from the dealership, and then that afternoon it acted up again. So again, she calls me up. I'm like tech support, and I call the dealership and say, the car acted up again. I want a full scan this time. Don't miss the opportunity. The battery's not the issue, and you have a new battery in there. Okay, you charge them whatever, $300-400 for diagnostics and a new battery, but I just want the code scan. And they're like, well, you know, it's going to be half-hour labor. I'm like, whatever it takes, just do it. So then they scanned it with the GM Tech 2, and the service rep told me that it only had 2 codes, the 606 and the 2534, stored in the ECM. That's it. No other module had codes. That's what he told me. And I told him, do you still have the scanner plugged in? He's like, no, we already moved to another vehicle. I'm like, the 2534 can't even be stored by the ECM. It can be stored by the fuel pump module or the transmission, but it can't be stored by the ECM. So again, I couldn't really do anything. I'm 3 hours away. I was trying to be nice, but I'm like, you know, you didn't give me the full information again. So you know, what am I supposed to do here? So okay, they got the car home. They called me up. I said, you have to get the car down here. The check engine light was on yesterday morning. It's not on right now, but no one cleared it. No one disconnected the battery. So we're in good shape. We have trouble codes stored in these modules. Now let's take a look at those and do a proper scan. Alright, so I did a quick scan on it. It pings all the modules and it says if it has a fault or not. So we have faults in, let's see, get a good shot at this. The ECM. Oh, come on, sunshine. There you go. Engine control module, fault. Fuel pump control module, fault. Transmission control module, fault. And next one is driver's door switch. We saw that before. The HVAC, we saw that before. And radio has a fault. And finally, the EBCM has a fault. Let's go back. So all these modules have faults, and you're telling me at the dealership yesterday it only had 2 faults in the ECM. Someone's not telling the truth. So I won't bore you with the details. I went into each module and got the codes, and here is what we have. In the ECM, let's see, block the sunlight a little bit here. Alright, in the ECM we have 3 codes stored. The P0606 control module internal performance. So that's key. The ECM is storing that code, not the FPCM like we thought last time, because it was scribbled on a sheet of paper and we literally took a guess on that. Now the next 2 codes are they're just kind of reference codes telling the computer that the FPCM requested check engine light and the TCM requested check engine light. So going down into the module specifically now, both the FPCM and the TCM set a P2534 code, ignition 1 switch, low voltage. Awesome. Then I also scanned the radio, and it said amp control circuit shorted to ground. Again, I don't know if that's relevant, but we scanned it, we wrote it down. We need to document everything because this is the last chance that I have to fix this car. They're not bringing it up for a 3rd time. Finally, in the ABS, we have a C0242 PCM indicated TCS malfunction, and that would explain the service stabilitrack light. And I believe the reduced engine power is coming from this 606 code. So now we're all on the same page. We have the codes. Next thing I want to do is look at some freeze frame data, especially for that 606 code, and kind of at least document that. So let's go into our ECM. Alright, so DTCs, read the codes. There you go. We have those 3. Now additional DTC information, freeze frame failure records. I want to see the P0606. Oh, that's unfortunate. The launch seems to have a malfunction. So I don't know why that looking up freeze frame data caused the launch to crash. Let's go into the FPCM and see. So there's a 2534 ignition 1 switch circuit low voltage code, and that's the same one we had before. So obviously there was nothing wrong with the FPCM that we replaced, and I can say that with no regrets, because you know that's the information we had back then, and we did what we had to do. So I guess we can't get freeze frame data from the FPCM or the TCM. Let's see here. Diagnostic trouble codes. Okay, the TCM we can, hopefully. Yep. Nice. So we see that our coolant temp was at 87, engine speed at 0, vehicle speed 0, IAT 16. Not quite sure if it was Fahrenheit or Celsius. It doesn't give you a unit there. Fluid temp. We have 5 pages of data. Shifting, gear ratios, engine torque, etc. So these are all specific to the transmission, not really helpful. I want to see freeze frame data from the ECM. Right? Now, possibly when this fault happened, the ECM couldn't store any data if it had a, you know, internal error or whatever. So that's a possibility. That's why we're crashing here. I'm just going to go in one more time. Go to freeze frame and try one of these. Let's try that guy. So this should be the same freeze frame. Yeah, it looks identical, huh? Ambient air temperature shows around freezing. Oh, here we go. Ignition 1 signal, 13 volts. Ignition 1 signal is 13 volts. That's key. Okay. I'm just trying to think here. Distance since DTC is cleared, so they drove 21 miles since the dealer replaced the battery. Warm up since DTC is cleared too. That's all very good information. Yep. Let's see here. What else do we want to look at? So that was key. Ignition 1 signal, etc. So let's go back. Take another look at this TCM data. Freeze frame. When the TCM requested a check engine light. And we should have... Come on. Alright, 13.03 volts on the ignition 1 signal. Excellent. Alright. Again, I think if I go into here, into freeze frame, it's going to crash on me again. We could try it, but then I need to reload the scanner. So that's where we're at. What would you guys do in this case? We need to use all of our resources the best we can. You know, service information, wiring diagrams. Can we make this happen? Or is this an internal PCM issue? Apparently it happens when it's really wet outside. And as you can see, it's not really wet outside. It's just dry and cold right now. So I have no hopes of recreating it at this moment. But again, we have to look at all the codes and kind of, you know, now that we have a picture of where they're coming from, we'll be able to, you know, get a better idea of where to go next. So, you know, think with me here, and I'll think of the next step. So here we have a wiring diagram pulled up of the ignition main relay, and through the beauty of Bluetooth, we're sitting inside the shop looking at data, and the truck is running outside. That is pretty cool. So where are these data pits coming from? Well, if you look at the schematic, this ignition main relay feeds the PCM right here. Let's scroll down just a little bit. There's the FPCM. There's our transmission. Okay? And the control side of the relay, this is actually grounded at G110. I looked that up already. And it's controlled by the ignition switch or the BCM. This is for the remote start, so the BCM can also turn this relay on, or you can turn it on through the ignition switch. Okay, cool. What would cause the FPCM and the TCM to send that 2534 ignition 1 voltage low code? Well, if you remember last time, you know, you could like pull this fuse out and then the computer is totally dead. I don't think that's the case here because you know, the computer like was showing stuff. It was saying, you know, reduced engine power and this and that. It didn't crank the engine, but it was alive. The dash was lit up. When we took that fuse out last time, there was nothing. So again, is that code 606 stored by the engine control module, is that caused by a loss of power or a bad ground maybe? Or is it really a processor fault? And then, you know, and then what? So did this relay turn off at some point when it wasn't supposed to, and then our, you know, our fuel pump control module and our transmission assembly or TCM, did those throw the code because there really was a low voltage event? That's my question right now. Are those codes real, or, you know, how does it know when the ignition voltage is supposed to be high or not? Like we saw last time, it's all about comparing it to what the ECM is, you know, what the ECM is seeing. If the ECM sees high voltage and the transmission sees low, then the transmission is like, well, I'm supposed to be high, I'm going to set a low voltage code. Also vice versa, we saw that when we pulled this guy, neither the ECM or the FPCM set any codes, but the TCM, the transmission, set a 2535, which is a voltage high code. So it has to be comparing it to something, and I think it's comparing it to the main engine computer. And if the engine computer goes, I don't know what's going on, those other two modules, they don't really have a comparison. So this is still not a straightforward diagnosis, but at least we have a lot more direction to go by here. So in this case, nothing beats factory service information. I looked up on ALLDATA, like, code definitions, and I really could not trust that information. So, for example, I'll show you. So we're in ALLDATA. Let's go to trouble codes, diagnostic trouble code descriptions. Let's see, P code charts. We could go through here, but for example, you look up 2534. Let's see, where are we here? 2534. Click on that, and notice 2535 isn't even listed. And see, right here it says 2534 fuel pump control module. So if you read that, you're like, oh, this is the fuel pump control module is the only one that can set this code. Not the case as we see on our scanner, because the TCM just set a 2534 too. So in this case, I do have to plug Identifix. That we can go into service manuals, and this is golden information here. So service manual, let's see. Let's go into diagnostic overview, starting point, and programming. Programming and setup, vehicle diagnostic information. Information and procedures. Right here we have powertrain diagnostic trouble code DTC definitions, or trouble code list. That's what we're after. Let's click on that. Here is our full list. Let's look up 2534. Right here. Fuel pump control module, or wiring systems and power management. And also it has a 2535 listed. That is already more information than ALLDATA provided. And we go in here, and here we have, there you go, transmission control module samples the system voltage on the ignition 1 voltage circuit every 0.1 seconds. Lower than normal voltage may be inadequate to operate the transmission control solenoid properly. Improper solenoid operation may cause, damage. So, conditions for running the DTC. The TCM ignition voltage signal is valid with the ignition on. The TCM ignition voltage signal is valid with the ignition off. So, 34 and 35. So, for the 34 sets, when the TCM detects 6 volts or less on the ignition voltage circuit with the ignition turned on. So that's key. Who tells the TCM when the ignition is turned on? That's a very important point. And the 35 is the TCM detects greater than 6 volts when the ignition is turned off. So remember, we could recreate this code when we pulled the ECM fuse. So the ECM voltage is low, but the TCM voltage is high. The ignition main relay was still on, and it set the 35 code because why? Because everything was still on, but the ECM saw 0 volts on the ignition 1 circuit. So, in this case, it's a comparison. The TCM saw greater voltage than the ECM. So the ECM basically determines, is the ignition on or off on that ignition 1 sense wire. That's very key. So let's see, action taken when DTC sets. TCM turns high side driver off, turns off all solenoids, commands maximum line pressure, so it goes into like a limp mode. and I guess 25, 35 it doesn't do anything because the ignition switch should be off anyways. Right? You're not going anywhere. So that's the kind of stuff that in ALLDATA you're not going to find. It's just not there. I don't know why not. We can go to our, let's see, code descriptions, I think. Powertrain P code list. So here, this list should be identical to the one we're just looking at, but we come down here to 2534, and right here it says ECM or TCM, and the TCM says cell link error, link target cell, like, is invalid for this publication. Well, it's not invalid because the card just, you know, threw the code. So I don't know what is up with that, but Diagnostics provides actual factory, like it just has a factory service manual on here, and I think that is fantastic. So right here, while we're still on this list, let's look up the 606 code. Let's see, 606 right here. So, and right here it says either the ECM can set this code or the fuel pump control module can set this code. In our case, it was definitely the ECM. That's the new piece of information we have this time. And right here, 606 control module processor performance. And let's see what we do about this code. This diagnostic code addresses if the ECM is not programmed incorrectly. Conditions for running the DTC. So here we go. The 606 runs when the ignition is on, system voltage is greater than 11 volts, and it just keeps checking itself. Conditions for setting the DTC, detects internal failure or incomplete incorrect programming. 606 is a type A DTC, so the check engine light comes on right away. And it says diagnostic aids. Low voltage or momentary loss of power or ground to the ECM may cause a DTC to set. Verify the following. Battery cables are clean and tight. Battery is fully charged. ECM ground circuits do not have an open or high resistance, and ECM power circuits do not have an open, short to ground, or high resistance. So I'll give the dealer, you know, a little bit of credit that, okay, sure, check the battery, and I don't know what $8,000 tool they used, but, you know, it might have been drained because the key was left on for a while, but that still doesn't justify disconnecting everything, clearing all the codes right away, and not even going through a full complete scan. That's what really kind of frustrated me. So you know, it could be a momentary loss of power or ground, like the flow chart says here. System verification. Verify the vehicles in the conditions of running the DTC, blah blah blah. And you know, it says if the 606 comes back this ignition cycle, replace the control module. Simple as that. But obviously we can't recreate it right now. So again, oh, and one more thing. I called the dealer up and said, is this ECM under warranty? And they said it is, because this vehicle has a, whatever, 7-year, 100,000 mile powertrain warranty. I'm like, well, that's pretty good. But the kicker is, it has to be acting up in their parking lot for them to diagnose it and call the ECM. Then they'll pay for, you know, putting a new one in, the part, labor, programming, etc. So in this case, I don't know, if we can't recreate this, I don't think it's going to fly. And we're not even sure that it still needs an ECM. You know, it could still be this loss of ground or power. So yeah, so we're still kind of stuck here, but again, more information is available. We have a better direction because we know that 606 was not set by the fuel pump control module. That was the main reason for changing it out last time. And now that we see that that code is actually stored in the ECM. So again, I guess we could replace the ECM and then wait for the next rainstorm and see if it happens again, but I don't think the owners of this vehicle would appreciate doing that. So, you know, we have to dig deeper. So I decided to try the trusty Verus on the Acadia here. Look at some freeze frame data and check out what we're showing on the snap-on tool. So this is in our transmission for the P2534, and the key parameter you want to look at is this ignition 1 voltage. It says 2.4 volts. Interesting. Very, very interesting. So, okay, 2.4 volts on ignition 1 voltage, you know, data PID. So I'm going to take a snapshot of that, exit out of here. It looks like it set it twice. Let's look at the second recording. It looks like it's the same numbers, right? 2.4 volts there. Warm up since DTC's cleared 1. Distance 6 miles. Okay. Yep, so it's the same. I don't know why it stored it twice, but it did. Now let's go back to our fuel pump. Display codes. DTC display 2534, sure enough. And for this one, it does not offer you any freeze frame data. Now let's go back into our engine. Codes menu, display codes. So, you know, there are the 3 codes that we have, the 606, 69E, and 700. And let's look at freeze frame data. So we actually have 4 records here. Let's look at this TCM and fuel pump control module request first. So 700, P0700 data list. Looking through, if you see anything abnormal, post it in the comments. For example, I'm looking at TPS 1 and 2, those agree. APP 1 and 2, there's a discrepancy. This one's 19, this one is only at 9. Now again, the computer might have been very confused at this point, but still keep that in mind. And check this out, ignition 1 signal 13 volts. That I don't like because we're not going anywhere, our engine is off. How can our ignition 1 signal be 13 volts? I don't like that number. You know, our engine RPM is 0. Okay? Exit out of here. Let's go to the second one, fuel pump request 69E. Again, we have APP 1 and 2 disagree for some reason, 19 and 9%. So again, I don't believe these numbers. They should be at 0. You weren't touching the gas, you know, when you're starting the truck. And then what else is out of the ordinary here? Ignition 1 signal 13 volts. I don't like that. Everything else seems okay. TPS 1 indicated position. TPS 2 is 20%. Distance since DTC's cleared 21 miles. Distance since first failure, 6 miles. So there's a first failure and there's a last failure. Interesting. Now let's look at these 606 trouble codes. Now this is where the launch crashed and the snap-on pulls through. So let's see. Distance since last failure, distance since first failure, 6 miles. Engine is off. Let's see, APP 1 and 2, there's 19% there and 9% there. I don't really like that. Our vehicle speed is apparently 158 miles per hour. But look at this, ignition 1 signal is 12.2 volts. Well, that is a believable number. Okay, that I can believe. But the 13 volts, not really. Last but not least, we have our last record, the 606. And this one, I think, is the same snapshot. Yep, 12.2 volts, 158 miles per hour. APP1 is at 19, APP2 is at 9. So that's even more information. In the transmission control module, that freeze frame showed 2.4 volts on the ignition 1 circuit. And I can only assume it was the same with the fuel pump control module when this happened. Now, could it be a bad, ignition relay? Anything's possible, I guess. You would expect it to be either 0 or battery voltage, not somewhere in between. But we have seen relays fail where it's just, on the the Dodge Dakota transmission limp home case study, it was at like 1.6 volts when the relay failed. So yeah, this is really involved.